where we are going to discuss two bank case studies, one by Credit Suisse and the other one by Scotiabank. My name is Hans Tesselaar. I'm the Executive Director, and on behalf of the BIAN community and especially Janet Wong from Scotiabank and Klaus Hagen from Credit Suisse, I would like to welcome you to this session. There is a lot of interest for this session. I would ask you again that you see if you have your phone on mute so that we don't get disturbed by the background noise, and we will do a Q&A at the end of this meeting. And the Q&A, we would like to use the chat opportunity that you see on the lower left side of the screen. I will give you a short introduction, a few slides about the bank industry architectural network, and then I will hand over to Klaus and Janet, and then I will give you a little bit more background on the background of the BIAN organization. Yeah, I see someone said there is a very strong echo in the line. I don't hear it, so maybe you have your speakers on from your laptop or PC. As you can see, there's a lot of interest. This is an overview of all the regions, the countries, the areas that people are dialing into. So it's more, as you can see, from Iceland all the way down to New Zealand, and from the Philippines all the way down to Mexico and Canada. So it's a real global coverage. So we are very proud on that, and we will not disappoint you by the quality of this webinar. Just to give you a short background on the BIAN as an association. The aim of BIAN and what we are doing as an association is to develop a standard service-oriented architecture for the financial industry, especially for banks, with the aim to reduce the integration cost, so that we are able, as a community, to become in one moment in time in a plug-and-play environment, so that it becomes more easier for banks to replace existing functionality by new functionality or add new functionality. And as we know, as of today, the cost of implementing an off-the-shelf product in your IT landscape is often triple or 4 times or 5 times the purchasing cost of the product. So the integration costs are a big hinder for improving the IT landscape within the bank. We do that on a consensus base with our members. I will come back to our members later on. And we are global. That means that our members are situated on all continents as of this year. We are open. That means that we allow all institutions that are active in the financial industry in as a member. And open also means that all our material is available on the BIAN.org site. You can download it when it's published, and you can use it as you want. We have around 45 members, and the latest version of the material, the BIAN Service Landscape, is downloaded somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 times. So there is a lot of usage of the material. So feel free to take a look at the BIAN.org website and give us your feedback if you have to take a look at the material. We are independent. We are a member-driven association, so are not for profit. So the members set the agenda. There is no, say, dominant party involved. It's one member, one vote, both in the General Assembly that we have once a year and also within our working groups. As today we are developing our service-oriented architecture based on the best practices from our member banks, but to the usage of the deliverables outside the membership base. We also get continuous feedback from non-members, and therefore I put the dot on the lower left side a little bit up in external, so that we can also reuse all the comment and the positive comment and the add-ons that are provided by non-members. If you go to the right hand side to the graph, you see where we want to aim to be in 2014. In 2014 we are aiming to have all the banking functionality in place, at least described, and that we are becoming more and more de facto standard in the industry, used by members and non-members. Just to give you a little idea where we are in the whole field of the standardization bodies that are active within the financial industry. We all know, of course, SWIFT of ISO 20022 that is administered by SWIFT. SWIFT is one of the members of BIAN, and when SWIFT joined at the beginning, they donated the ISO 20022 meta model, and we adopted that meta model, and we extended the meta model into the application to application space. So we are focusing primarily on all activities within the four walls of the bank, while SWIFT, ISO 20022 and IFX are more focusing on the B2B. Both ISO and IFX are more message driven, so they have physical message definitions, whilst BIAN provides business content semantic service definitions. That means that we have all our services available in natural language. We have a strong collaboration with ISO, IFX, OMG, and since a few months with the EDM Council, especially on FIBO, the Financial Industry Business Ontology. So we are trying to reuse as much as possible the material provided by other standardization bodies and vice versa, so that we are not reinventing wheels that are already exist. So this gives you a little bit an idea of where you should position BIAN and when you look at our material. When we look at our member base, this is the member base as of today. You can see that we have a membership base that's rather global spread. For instance, the Bangkok Bank, well, that's in Asia. We have here the Commercial Bank of Qatar, Commonwealth Bank in Australia, DBS in Singapore, Galicia in Argentina, PNC in the US, Scotia of course in Canada, and Standard Bank in South Africa. So this is a rather global spread. Similar with our partners. We have, of course, the usual names like IBM, Infosys, Suncard, TCS, Temenos, SAP, and a lot of other vendors that provide services in the financial service industry. Some known and some are unknown. I think there are two different member types. That is the Singapore Management University. That's what we call an academic partner, and also the new academic partner that we haven't announced yet is the Institute for Development and Research for Banking Technology, and that's an institute that is started with the Federal Bank of India to improve the overall quality of the IT within the Indian banks. And we are very proud that with both IDRBT and SMU we have a working relationship, so that from an academic side we also can expect some publications. So this is the membership. To look at the material and see if there is any benefits for you in joining. This is the roadmap. I explained it already a little bit. In September we published the 2.5 series of a landscape. Out of the 270 plus unique business capabilities that we call service domains that we have identified, we have now somewhere around 100 that we have described. In January, at least in the first quarter of 2014, we are aiming to publish the 3.0 release, where we will have at least all banking functionality defined, and that means that we are not having available yet at that moment in time the support functions like IT, HR, building and equipment, vendor management, and so on and so forth. That is something we would like to deliver somewhere at the end of 2014, and then the whole of the landscape should be available. I'll come back to you later at the end after Janet did the case study on Scotiabank, and I would now like to hand over to Klaus Hagen from Credit Suisse to guide us to the Credit Suisse case study. Klaus, it's yours.
Thank you, Hans, and hello to everyone also from my side. I want to show you with a few slides what we are doing within Credit Suisse using the BIAN deliverables in order to give you some ideas about the values that you can gain out of using the BIAN assets that have been developed so far. My name is Klaus Hagen. I'm head of data and integration architecture at Credit Suisse, and I want to start by giving you a quick overview about my company. In a nutshell, Credit Suisse is the second largest Swiss financial services provider. It has two main pillars on the business side. On the one hand, the investment banking arm, on the other hand, private banking and wealth management. And this also includes the complete retail and commercial bank within Switzerland. This means pretty big operations both on the business and on the IT side, which you also see on this slide. We have a bit less than 50,000 employees. Interestingly, 60% not working in Switzerland, so we're not really a Swiss bank anymore. And assets under management of roughly 1,200 billion, which makes us, I think, one of the big five in terms of wealth management globally. On the IT side, this means a global footprint with 4 big data centers distributed around the world and roughly 6,000 applications which are operated in the different data centers and for the different parts of the business. And this size and complexity already explains to some degree why service-oriented architecture and BIAN especially is interesting for us. We started quite early in adopting service-oriented architecture. The first initiative that tried to apply service-oriented architecture was called the Credit Suisse Information Bus and was started in 1998, so exactly 15 years ago, and was mainly focusing on the Swiss wealth management application platform, where still today we have about 1,300 services which are in production and where basically the whole Swiss platform uses this service layer to communicate between all the different applications. We then continue to apply the SOA principle every time again where we had problems in the integration space. You see some of the examples here in the list on the slide. I just want to mention 2 here. Obviously BIAN is mentioned as well because that's for us an important continuation of our SOA strategy. But what's currently very important for us is the second item, the front to back integration problem, where we are trying to apply SOA in the complex data flows between our trading systems in the investment bank and the different risk, finance, and operations systems that are supporting the business in these areas, because today with bottom-up grown point-to-point data flows, we are facing huge data quality problems. And maybe the last example is the one at the bottom, the interfaces into our central data warehouse platform, which are mainly file-based, or as it is called here, bulk services. And that's for us an important principle. We treat file-based integration as service-oriented integration as well, and want to bring the same degree of management to file-based data transfers that we do to messaging or more service request reply style communication. So like I said, we do a lot of SOA, and we even went so far of developing our own management system for the services that we maintain in the organization, because about 5-6 years ago we had a failed attempt to source an SOA repository on the market that fulfilled our requirements. So in the end we decided to build our own, which is quite useful today, because in addition to a searchable service catalog that maintains all of our services, we could add a bunch of other functionalities which makes it easy to manage the services and also to extend the value of the managed services. So for instance, we have an integrated code generation layer which allows us, out of the abstract service definitions, to generate code for the different platforms that allows us to more quickly implement services and reuse services. So much for our SOA strategy and some of the elements we have in place to leverage it. And let's move now to BIAN and what we are doing there. Credit Suisse was actually a founding member of BIAN more than 5 years ago. And you see that I'm reusing a picture that Hans showed before, which shows the BIAN vision and strategy to very quickly now reach a status where BIAN defines global standards for the industry. And the main motivation for us to help kick off BIAN was the observation that our internal SOA strategy and principles helped very well in those situations where we build our own software. In those cases where you can control all of the interfaces, SOA is a good principle to integrate the solutions. But obviously in many cases you don't build your own solutions anymore these days. Even in the financial industry, you try to buy packages wherever possible and integrate standard solutions. And there we still have the problem today that more than 60% of the costs for bringing in a packaged solution are due to the integration of this new solution with existing systems in the organization. And it becomes worse if you want to combine several packaged solutions, because you can be sure all have different interfaces, different ways to interact, and especially different semantics of the data that they manage and the functions they provide. So the thinking 5 years ago was, if we manage to standardize the semantics of the interfaces into these packages, it should become much easier to integrate applications in the future. And this is still our, I would say, our long-term value proposition of collaborating with BIAN and supporting BIAN in reaching its goals. But obviously, since we are a bank and banks have quarterly reporting cycles, it's not so easy to argue for the money and the resources required to participate in BIAN if you say, oh, we have a benefit maybe in 5 or 6 years. So there must be other benefits as well of collaborating with BIAN. And they are summarized on this slide, and then I give you more details on each of them on the subsequent slides. So basically, in addition to the long-term benefit of having standardized packages which reduce of having our architects participate in BIAN working groups and learn what others are doing and benefit from this. We see a value in the BIAN Service Landscape, which is one of the deliverables of BIAN, as an asset that we can use internally. And we also have found that the BIAN methodology for SOA has helped us, at least in one case so far, to help our initial projects making faster progress. But let me give you a bit more details about each of these three areas. Let's look at the BIAN Service Landscape first. It was already mentioned by Hans that the service landscape is one of the major assets that BIAN has developed over the last 5 years. And you can think of the service landscape as kind of a model bank broken down in about 250 to 300 components. Each of these components is called a service domain, and each service domain is encapsulated by service operations and manages a particular so-called service object and the full life cycle of this service object. On the picture on the right, I'm not sure if you can see this very well at the moment because it's a bit small in this presentation. You see one example, that's the current account service domain, which basically manages all the aspects of implementing and handling a current account. This is information, by the way, which is available on the internet on the BIAN homepage. So if you look there for the Service Landscape 2.5 link, you can get directly to this view on the Service Landscape and can browse through all of the service domains. So what does it bring as an advantage for Credit Suisse? We have one challenge here in Credit Suisse since, as I mentioned, we started already 15 years ago with our service-oriented architecture, and BIAN started 5 years ago. We already had to define our own landscapes and models in the meantime. So today we have a proprietary business capability model which kind of defines the business architecture, and we have a proprietary IT domain model which structures our application landscape into domains. So we could not go forward and just adopt the BIAN service landscape and bring it into the company because everybody was already using other models and the change would have been too big. But we found out that nevertheless the service landscape is quite valuable because one issue we are facing is that both the business capability model and the IT domain model were not developed with service orientation as the first design driver. They were used for many other things, the business capability model especially for discussing a functional breakdown of the bank with the business, and the IT domain model primarily to categorize all our 6,000 applications. So we're currently in a process to adjust these models to make them fit to our service-oriented architecture strategy better than they used to be in the past. And we found that the BIAN service landscape is an excellent reference to do so. So we are currently in the process of comparing the BIAN service landscape with its service-oriented breakdown of a bank with the models that we have in place and making focused proposals of adjusting our own models so they are more suitable for service orientation, especially in those areas where we are not service oriented so far. And I mentioned this investment banking front to back problem. We hope that we can make good progress there by learning from the BIAN service landscape and adopting some of the structures in our own models we're using for innovation. Message that network connectivity was lost. Let me see. Yeah, I cannot switch slides anymore. Could you please switch slides for me?
Close through. I'm already on the next slide. That's number 18. All right.
Thank you. Thanks. Because
no
I lost the view on the slides completely. So the next topic I wanted to touch on is the actual BIAN SOA method. So what BIAN developed kind of as a tool for its own work was a method on how to discover and define services, because BIAN was facing the problem that there are many working groups which define the service domains we have seen on the last slide, and also define business scenarios that explain how these different service domains work together, and also then in the end define the services that are required to interact with such a service domain. So BIAN had the problem of giving guidance to these working groups on how to define all of these assets. So there's a cookbook today called the How To Guide, and this basically has a methodology of how to identify and define service domains and the interaction between them. And we found that this is a value in itself, especially in areas where you don't have the possibility to reuse the BIAN service domains directly, because it's a different domain. And the particular example where we used this within Credit Suisse was our infrastructure department, which 2 years ago started an initiative to basically automate all the complex processes for infrastructure ordering, infrastructure delivery, and deployment, and they wanted to do this in a service-oriented way. So the idea would be that if you order an application server, you would go to a portal, click a button to order it, and then in the background there would be a lot of service-oriented calls that would then actually trigger the deployment of the necessary virtual machines, of installation of the necessary software packages, deployment of the necessary databases, and so on. So that's you can imagine that these are processes which in some cases are as complex as complex banking processes as well. So they wanted to do it service-oriented in order to get to a straight-through processing system for this. And they said, well, can you help us in identifying the services, finding out how to define the granularity of the domain and of the components and so on. And we found it was quite helpful to explain to them the BIAN SOA method, which is defined in the How To Guide, and tell them, okay, that's the main thinking you should apply. You should identify what are your service domains with the discrete capabilities, as it is called here on the right side of the slide. Then you should basically, once you have identified them, start defining business scenarios and define the messages which are sent between these two. Quickly and helping them very quickly to define the basic service landscape for their problem area. So this was quite valuable. And Yvonne, if you could switch to the next slide, please. That's the third area where we see benefits. Obviously, we also participate in selected working groups within BIAN that define the services and define the semantics of the service domains. And these working groups typically consist of a group of subject matter experts from various banks, software houses, and system integrators, which is quite interesting because you have a lot of subject matter knowledge aggregated in these working groups. So what we try to do in projects where we have challenging architecture problems to solve, we try to encourage these projects to send their architects to the BIAN working groups, participate there, and through this get important input for our own work within our landscape. Some examples where we did this was the customer data project that we had a few years back, where basically the bank had planned to redesign the complete customer data system in the private bank, and the responsible architect for this for several years participated in the party working group of BIAN, which is not partying but really defining all the data and services required to manage business partners and the interaction of a business partner system to other systems. And this helped us to understand what others are doing in this area, what big companies like SAP, Sangha, Temenos are doing in this area, and helped us in finding the best design for our own system. Another more recent example is a working group that BIAN runs at the moment on investment banking. And again, we've sent in one of our architects into this group because we expect to get important insight for the problem I mentioned earlier, this management of the complex data flows between trading, risk, finance, operations. So ideally, we have the same benefits again in that we learn from the peers and from the industry to bring the best possible solution also into our own systems. And Yvonne, if you could switch again one last time. This is my summary slide. So after a bit more than 5 years of BIAN, my impression is BIAN has reached quite a good level of maturity, and the deliverables that we have today are on a level of maturity where they can be actually used even in a bank where there is already quite some investment into SOA and a large number of services. I have to say though that the biggest benefit still comes from the direct participation in the working groups. Where possible, we try to delegate people into the working groups and have them benefit for the collaboration, although it's always difficult, and you might face the same problem that obviously these experts are also quite busy in the projects they're doing, so convincing them to spend some time also in these working groups sometimes is challenging. So we are glad that we are also, as I showed you in the presentation, are able to more and more use some of the BIAN assets internally and through this improve our own architecture, implementations and solutions around service-oriented architecture. And as you've seen from the vision slide from Hans, we expect that the maturity of BIAN assets will increase even more, and hopefully at some stage we reach the degree of standardization that will also deliver packaged solutions with standardized interfaces and semantics. That's all from my side. Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay, Klaus, well, thank you very much for your clear explanation of how Credit Suisse is using it. And of course, I should have mentioned at the start that Credit Suisse is one of the founding members, but you correct me from that part, so that's good. Klaus also mentioned the value that the organization gets out of the how-to guide. I would like to point you again to the BIAN.org site where you can download the complete how-to guide, explaining all the underlying architectural principles and decisions that we have made, but also explaining how to determine the size of a service domain. And there are also several usage scenarios in the how-to guide. And I think it's also, you saw the picture that Klaus showed from one of the service domains. The whole model is since February available for non-members in an HTML version, so you can browse through the whole model, you can search in the model, you can drill down in the model, you can do that even on your tablet. So we are one of the few that have the whole model available on the tablet. On the other hand, for members we do have the whole model available in a UML version, so that it can be uploaded in whatever design tool the organization is using, and we already seen some examples of that upload in the design tool. And also on the BIAN.org site you can find a white paper written by IBM, how IBM is using the BIAN model in cooperation with their rationale toolset and the IFW industry models. So that's a little bit on the some additional information on Klaus's presentation. I would now like to hand over to Janet Wong from Scotiabank. Klaus showed one example of usage within the bank, or at least several, and Janet has within Scotiabank a different approach. So Janet, please share with us your thoughts of the usage of BIAN within Scotiabank.
Thank you, Hans. Yvonne, can you help me to, are you going to be switching the slides for me, or? Okay. So good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I'm Jeanette Wong from Scotiabank, and I'm an enterprise architect there. I just want to give you a quick kind of a 10-second overview introduction of Scotiabank before I dive into the first slide. Bank of Nova Scotia, or Scotiabank, is one of the 6 largest banks in Canada, and as a company it was started back in 1832, and currently it has 83,000 employees with around 21 million customers covering 55 countries worldwide. It is in fact the most international bank that is originated in Canada. So it's my pleasure here to give you an idea of how Scotiabank has been leveraging BIAN. So I'll dive right into, there are going to be 3 use cases that I will describe in the next 10 minutes or so. So the very first one is one of the kind of low-hanging fruits. So within Scotiabank, actually similar to Credit Suisse, we also have an SOA services repository. And this particular repository contains development time metadata for SOA services, which includes attributes such as name, description, interface, schemas, classification, and some compliance-related attributes. What we have done is we have adopted the BIAN Service Landscape and the corresponding service domains as the main functional classification scheme for the SOA services. So Yvonne, next page. An entry screen when developers in Scotiabank upload their services into the service repository, they will be faced with a screen like this, where they put in, the name, a description, and the contact information, and later on, elsewhere on the screen, they put in interfaces and schemas and so on. Next page, please. So. One of the things we found out is that because BIAN has done a decomposition of the banking capabilities, it is a very kind of easy way for us to adopt the BIAN Service Landscape as our own functional classification scheme. And the reason is because across the different development groups in the bank, sometimes they have different classification schemes, but to come to a general consensus amongst the development teams ourselves is a very long process. There is a lot of debates involved and so on. But instead, BIAN has already done the work for us. So as a result, we have configured into our SOA services repository fact the BIAN Service Landscape. So you can see here a screen capture showing you approximately how it looks like. So basically on the top left picture, you see the BIAN Service Domain classification scheme, and then it expands into the different business areas, and then the business domains, and finally the individual service domains. And you can see that in the sort of the bottom half of the slide here, you see that under the operations and execution business area, we have the consumer products business domain, and then the consumer loans and deposits business domain. And finally, the 5 service domains such as secured loans, unsecured loans, and so on, and each one with their description. So a developer, during upload of a service into the service repository, will be able to select one of the service domain as to where the service belongs, and we find that to be a very important feature of the service of the repository, and it's something that we do appreciate to be able to get it from BIAN, because like I said before, if we were to do it ourselves, it will take months or perhaps even a whole year of debates amongst ourselves. Yvonne, next slide. So the second use case that I would like to describe is to classify oh no, sorry, I haven't gotten to the second use case yet. This is still the first use case. So as I mentioned earlier, the service landscape is useful because it has been carefully analyzed and designed by BIAN. It is vendor independent, it is comprehensive, and it enables a consistent classification across the entire development community, development areas, so that we can all use the same categories. We have experienced sometimes a little bit of clarification needed when we look at the definition of a service domain. Sometimes we are not 100% sure exactly what it means, but because we are a member of BIAN, we are able to get in touch with people within BIAN, such as the chairs of the different service definition working groups or the chief architect, and they have always been very helpful in explaining or clarifying to us what is the definition of the individual service domains if we have any questions. It also encourage consistent terminology use within the bank, and we consider this to be a first step in our identifying gaps and overlaps, because once we have kind of categorized our services according to the service landscape, we can start to notice gaps and overlaps and be able then to work towards a resolution or rationalization of our portfolio. So next page. A second use case that we have, and I call it a potential use case because it is something that we have started, but we have not gotten to the end of it, which is the reason why I don't want to give any illusion, and so I'm being a bit conservative and call it a potential use case. But it is something that we have started to do. So one of the things we have started to do is to use the service domains to help organize our interfaces. I'm sure like many banks, we purchase applications. We don't develop every single piece of business capability in-house. So what we do is that with a vendor purchased application, and I agree with what Credit Suisse Klaus has pointed out, the vendor applications are currently not compliant with BIAN yet, many of them. So because of that, we cannot always kind of decompose the vendor's application according to the BIAN service landscape. At the same time, there is a desire to sort of encapsulate the vendor application within the bank so that the rest of the banking applications do not directly interface with the vendor applications. In case if, maybe perhaps sometimes the interfaces are not exactly the way we want, or that we may even anticipate a change potentially in the future. So it is in fact quite a common practice to develop a wrapping layer to encapsulate the vendor application. And in this case, how do we develop that? How do we architect or design that wrapper layer? What we do then is to use the the service domains as a reference or as a guide in terms of understanding how those interfaces of the wrapper and the operations of that wrapper should be organized. So as an example, recently we were developing a solution that has to do with investment planning and so on, and we identify within the service domains, within the service landscape, several service domains that have to do with investments. And right away we were able to use that piece of information or insight and guide our architects to basically think about the interfaces as being kind of coarsely divided up into several portions rather than kind of one big chunk. So without the guidance of the service domains, it is very easy to overlook the need, and that flexibility is required. And so we do appreciate being able to use the service domains as a reference for us. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides also describe, again, a use case that we have started but we have not finished. So this particular use case has to do with development of application roadmaps. So what happened is that currently, traditionally, within the bank, sometimes when we look at an application roadmap, we tend to look inside of the bank. So we look at, okay, here is the application, this is what it is doing. Are there other applications within the bank, within our bank, that is doing exactly the same thing? And how do we amalgamate them, merge them? How do we, identify overlaps and gaps? Well, taking this particular traditional approach is going to kind of reinforce the status quo, which does not really open up our minds to look at what is outside and some perhaps bigger improvement opportunities. So what happened is that recently, as we started within Scotiabank to develop the roadmap for a particular application, we actually consulted and checked with the chief architect of BIAN, and from him we were able to get a list of service domains that have to do with the nature of the application that we are dealing with. And this application actually has to do with customer data, which is of reference data or business information. And in so we were able to get from the chief architect of BIAN the domains that have to do with customer data. And so next slide, please. So with that list of service domains, we were able to identify the different viewpoints of those service domains, because not all service domains view the same reference data in the same manner. Some service domains look at it more from a historical perspective. That's what its emphasis is. Another service domain look at it from a contractual perspective. Yet another one look at it from a financial transactions or behavioral perspective or analytical perspective. So the different service domains have different emphasis, even though they access the same data. And also, the different service domains have different data requirements in terms of the key attributes and the relationships, and also, very importantly, the data quality. Some service domains require very precise data, but other service domains may be able to cope with data that is less, that have less precision. So as a result of looking at the list of service domains, it does broaden up our minds and help us to take a fresher look at basically the context of that particular application or set of applications that we are dealing with, and look outside of the box that is our current bank, the way things are. And we also were able to we are also trying to compare that list of service domains with the list of stakeholders that we have identified within the bank. So because of doing that, we should be able to match up to see whether did we miss any stakeholders. For example, if there is a service domain looking at the key reference data from a particular perspective, and yet we don't know who that stakeholder is, maybe we missed that particular unit within the bank, and we then can go and find out which unit it is. And also we also sometimes be able to find out maybe there is no current stakeholder and it can imply an opportunity, something that the bank should think about. So as a result of that, we are able to leverage the service domains to ensure that we have sufficient coverage in terms of the stakeholders that we are engaging, the scenarios that we are covering, and the requirements that we are looking at. So next slide, please. This one also talks about a more intangible kind of a benefit from being a BIAN member is our participation in the BIAN working groups. As you probably know by now, the working groups comprise subject matter experts and also people with shared interests. And by being able to collaborate and network, we have opportunities to gain insight and fresh viewpoints. Again, think outside and gain knowledge outside from our current state of affairs within the bank. It is a great opportunity for professional growth and for continuous learning. Next slide, please. So to summarize, Scotiabank has been a member of BIAN for the last 3 years, and we are convinced of the value of what BIAN is trying to do, and that is to provide an SOA architecture, a conceptual and logical framework to standardize it for the banking industry. But at the same time, we are very cognizant of the fact that becoming an international standard is a journey, and there are many challenges, along the way, especially when a lot of the work is reliant on volunteers to contribute their effort and the time. We do see that direct participation is one of the keys to getting the benefits in the near term. As well, I almost forgot to say, but it's important, I do agree very much with what Klaus has said before, pointed out before, that the methodology, the design approach of the BIAN service domain is something that Scotiabank will also see that we can adopt, and we look forward to finding an opportunity to, basically following the BIAN approach on how to define the granularity or the scope of a service domain. That is something that we would like to do. Now, we do understand that, again, because of the nascent, somewhat, although there is a certain amount of maturity, but becoming an international standard, nonetheless, is a long journey. So there is going to be much more outputs of BIAN that are coming in the coming, several years, and there will, again, be corresponding more maturity for them. And because of that, we look forward to those outputs and leveraging them as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, Janet. Well, thank you very, very much. I think you made a strong statement on how you use it, and knowing you were always on the safe side, so the potential use case. I think what we see during the presentation, that there are different ways of using the BIAN landscape in your journey towards, let's say, a SOA maturity. You showed us different aspects. It's all at the beginning. It's all laying the fundament to build your own landscape based on the BIAN material. If you look at if you go to the BIAN.org website, you will find also a case study done by SunGard, explaining how they use our approach in building a complete new payment solution. There you can learn about the translation that they made from the way we define the service domain, the way we use what we call our business scenarios to come to a new product approach, and that's similar for the bank, but that is a case study that's clearly available. And Janet explained all about the wrapper of the systems, and in the next version of the how-to guide that will be out in the first quarter of 2014, we will do some examples how you can more or less downsize or integrate what we always call in a negative intonation the legacy into your landscape by using a methodology that we call externalization. So keep an eye open to the next deliverables, and there will be much more content available. I just guide you through the BIAN organization. Jeanette and both Klaus explained already about all the working groups. So you see here in the green ones, the darker green ones are the working groups that are providing the content. You can see the different domains, analytics, party, payments, and so on and so forth. We have, of course, a design authority. We have a quality assurance group. We have an architectural framework and foundation group responsible for maintaining the meta model and maintaining all the packages that we are using, the magic draw package, so that the HTML and UML will be available. We started last year a business vocabulary group that's chaired by Janet Wong, that we just heard from Scotiabank, to make sure that we use the same terminology throughout of the model. So this gives you a slight overview of all possible working groups that are available, that are active, and let's say this is my role as the executive director, and underneath, and Janet called it volunteers, and that's the way I would call it, are around 120 active people in all the different work groups and in the domain experts that various already explained by Klaus and Jeanette, that the networking opportunity, the direct access to the expert, gives you a head start in developing your landscape. Just to give you a little bit of flavor of who are in charge of the landscape, this is the board of directors of BIAN. The chairman of the BIAN board is Stephen White. Steve is the executive vice president within the executive board of PNC, the US bank. We have David Vender, who's responsible for all the operations for Asia Pacific for Microsoft. Don Trotta, responsible for the banking industry within SAP. Jochen Schneider for retail banking and SunGard. Cheyenne, the vice president for financial service for IBM. And last but not least, Peter van Buren, who is the global CIO, commercial banking within ING Bank. So this is the team that is inspires us, bring us forward, and define the strategy. The next sheet is how to become a member. There are a lot of encouragements by both Klaus and Jeanette to become a member. There is a difference between a member and a non-member. On the right-hand side, you see the non-member area. That's an open space. There's the BIAN.org website. Everybody can access it, and all the published material is there available. It's the HTML version, it's the PDF of the how-to guide, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, we see the BIAN internal website, the BIAN Wiki, and there you can find all the material, the work in progress, but also material that we haven't published yet. We are working on some different models that are available there, and of course the UML version. As a member, you have access to all the material, and you have access to all the members, and already mentioned by Jeanette, our lead architect, who can support you and help you in your way forward. The next one is, okay, what are the different membership categories? We identify the larger vendors, and we have an annual fee of 30,000 euros. It's a flat fee, so there are no hidden costs. There is no limit on the people you want to give access to material, or if you want to delegate to working groups or to our physical meetings. For banks, we have also the flat fee for 20,000 euros. For the smaller vendors, it's 10,000. For the federal banks, it's also 10,000, and academic partners, as I explained early on, the Singapore Management University and the IDRBT, they are in it for free because they contribute in a completely different way. We have several levels of engagement. So we have 3 times a year we have a physical meeting where all the members meet. Last week we had our meeting in Rotterdam, and over 60 people attended the meeting. All the working groups meet, so there is a huge activity within the working groups and between the working groups. The next event, core team meeting, is planned in March, hosted by one of our members, Swift, in New York. I will encourage everybody who is able to join us. We are always inviting non-members to come to the introduction day, that is the day before, so that you can get an in-depth smell of what we are doing, a taste of what we are doing, discuss it with people that are there, and we are always very, very pleased to invite prospective banks to stay for the whole core team meeting, so that they can participate and sit in all the different working groups, and then you can make up your mind what's in it for me. The second level of participation is doing reviews, very important for us, because we decided not to publish any material unless it's approved/reviewed by at least one bank. So the reviews are important, but of course the active participation in working groups, as explained by both Klaus and by Jeanette, that's the real value. And the working groups meet on average every 2 to 3 weeks for 1 to 1.5 hours in a virtual meeting like this, a web session with a conference call. If the work groups also meet and the members also meet at our physical meetings, then you should count an additional, let's say 12 to 15, maybe 20 days on a yearly basis that you need to invest in being an active member. We have some upcoming meetings. The lead architect, Guy Reckham, and myself are visiting our members in Singapore in November. So if you are in that area and you want to set up a meeting to discuss or explain or introduce us to your team, just send a mail to info@bian.org. We will conduct an executive meeting in Bangkok, hosted by our member, the Bangkok Bank, and that is also available for non-members. So if you are interested, also send a mail to info@bian.org, and we will send you an invite. There are no costs involved, not for Singapore and not for the Bangkok Summit. And I already mentioned the BIAN Introduction Day that will be in New York on March the 25th. There are also no cost involved. So if you want to have a feeling what is going on and how should we move on and what's in it for us, feel free to attend. And of course we can also do a presentation for your team or for your bank in a similar way we do this, but then can into more details for your specific situation. So now it's question time. I already saw one question. Please type your question in the lower right corner. It's now expanded. You can also see that the webinar will be available on the BIAN.org site. So we record it and you can play it back, and also the slide deck will be available. So if you have a question, don't hesitate, and we will then decide who is the best one to answer. You already see an answer from Dave Banco, and Dave Banco is the BIAN program manager who runs all the working groups you saw in the previous slides. So if there is a question, feel free and just type your question. Okay, Alejandro, I will answer that question. What we do in the service landscape, we define the service domains, as we call it, the unique business capabilities, and then we use the business processes provided by our member banks to translate them in what we call a business scenario, and you can also find all those in the how-to guide and on the BIAN.org. And then we are defining the service, so the request and response. So if you click on the message, you will find the content and the message definitions, also in the post and break conditions, but also the information, the flows between one domain and the other domain, and it's all written in natural. We are saying your with EDM Council. We are coordinating with EDM Council, but on a different level, because we are not building a data model, but we are aligning with them. But we are discussing with the EDM Council, as I already explained, the FIBO, what they are developing, the financial industry business ontology, that we are going to reuse. So that is what we are doing. So we are staying away a little bit from the data because we are focusing on the interoperability between the domains. Okay. I see no one else typing, and we are already 15 minutes past the hour. So if you have any questions, just send a mail to info@bian.org, and we'll make sure it will be answered. You can also go to info@bian.org for all your other questions or additional need for information. I would like to thank you all for attending and staying all the time in the call. And I would of course like to say a great thank you to both Klaus and Jeanette for the great job that they did. And I think it's always good to hear from a member bank how they are applying the landscape, and that you can also then see and hear that it's more than paperware, that we are past the point of the PowerPoint, so that it's really implementable. So thank you very much for attending, and again thanks Klaus and Jeanette for all the effort they did to make this happen.